March 12, 1932, Paris. A man lies dead in a private apartment, still in his coat, a revolver beside him. Newspapers on 3 continents had called him the savior of governments, the man who lent money to entire countries. In 4 months, auditors would discover he'd been lying to the world for over a decade. He built a fraud that dwarfed Bernie Madoff's, and he did it by hijacking entire countries. His name was Ivar Kreuger, and matches had nothing to do with his early career. He studied engineering in Sweden. He graduated early. Then, at 20, he sailed to America, not to sell anything, but to build things. Construction work, the kind with dirt under your fingernails. He came home in 1907 and started a match company. It sounds almost quaint, but his family was already in that business. His father, his uncle, and his brother were running factories that were quietly falling apart. A banker pulled Kreuger aside with a suggestion. Stop running this like a family shop. Turn it into a real corporation. Kreuger listened, and he didn't stop at fixing the family business. By 1917, he'd merged nearly every matchmaker in Sweden into a single company. One name, one monopoly. That was supposed to be the ceiling. It was the floor. Why matches? Think about 1920s life. No lighters, no electric stoves. If you wanted fire for your kitchen, your cigarette, your lamp, you needed a match. Every day, everywhere. It's about as close to guaranteed demand as a product gets. Kreuger understood that better than anyone, and he built something far stranger than a match company. After World War I, Europe was broke. Governments needed cash and had nowhere left to borrow it. Kreuger showed up with an offer. He would loan a country millions of dollars at a modest interest rate of 5 or 6%. He'd hand over roughly half the profits from match sales in that country.
But Kreuger wasn't just being generous. He was setting a trap, and the catch was buried deep in the fine print. In exchange, that government would give his company the exclusive right to sell matches there for the next 25 to 30 years. No competitors, ever. One academic study called the strategy exactly what it was, a win-win for Kreuger and cash-starved governments, built entirely on short-sighted policy. Poland signed first for $6 million, Greece followed, then France for a loan of $75 million. By the late 1920s, Kreuger was functioning like a private, unofficial version of the IMF, and he used match monopolies as the collateral. If you try to count how much money he actually controlled, you hit a wall, and that was by design. Some sources say Kreuger held monopoly deals in 14 countries, others say 16 or more. Total loans sat somewhere between $250 and $300 million. Global market share hovered anywhere from 2/3 to 90%. He built his empire through more than 400 subsidiary companies, spread across dozens of countries. In the 1920s, foreign holding companies didn't have to disclose real financial statements. Kreuger exploited that gap. He moved liabilities off his balance sheet, hiding losses inside a maze of shell corporations. When investors asked questions, he implied the questions themselves were beneath him. His methods were too sophisticated to explain. Bankers simply stopped asking. In the short term, desperate governments felt like they won. They got real cash exactly when they needed it. But look at who paid for that cash. In every country under a Kreuger monopoly, local matchmakers lost their livelihoods overnight. There was no one left to sell to. Match prices for ordinary families roughly doubled. The deal wasn't a scam at the signing table. Nobody held a gun to any minister's head. The exploitation was baked into the following 25 years, paid for by people who never sat in that room. For years, this machine just kept running. Then October 1929 happened. The scheme had always depended on a steady stream of new investors handing Kreuger fresh money to pay off the old obligations. It's a structure economists have a blunt name for, a Ponzi structure. When Wall Street crashed, that pipeline stopped. The crash didn't create the problem. It just turned off the only thing keeping it hidden. What happened next is almost darkly funny in the way real desperation sometimes is. Kreuger needed to prove an Italian match monopoly was still real, so he forged it. He fabricated bond documents and signed them with the names of actual Italian government officials. According to biographer Frank Partnoy, he was clumsy at it. He misspelled the names of the very officials he was impersonating. This is a man who fooled the world's biggest banks for over a decade. In the end, he couldn't even fake a signature convincingly. Kreuger never saw the fallout. Within a month of his death, the entire empire collapsed into bankruptcy. It took 30 accountants an entire summer just to trace his phantom money. The fictitious assets were so vast that the deficit in Kreuger's empire was larger than Sweden's entire national debt. Sweden's prime minister resigned. Ordinary savers lost money they would never get back. But unlike a pure scam, Kreuger's empire rested on a foundation of real profitable industries, just heavily disguised by fake accounting. Companies tracing back to his deal-making, Ericsson, SKF, Boliden, are still major businesses today. His collapse helped birth the SEC. It's the reason every American company today is legally forced to open its books. He wasn't the savior of governments. He was their most convincing salesman, selling them a fire that eventually burned down the house he built.